I'd like to ask the Minister for Policy and Reform by what date all government and public sector workers, including those not employed under the public service pay scales, will be paid at least a living wage.
On the Minister to reply, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Programme for Government 2018 has given a commitment to amend public service pay scales for established employment groups so that the minimum pay point is no lower than the living wage by 30th of June 2018. As part of current pay negotiations, the Public Services Commission has proposed to remove spine points 8 and 9 on the new starter scale, which are currently below the living wage. This will have the effect of bringing all PSC pay levels above the living wage with effect from 1st of April 2018. This will be implemented and backdated once the pay negotiations are concluded and a settlement agreed. In terms of other employment groups, a similar change is to be made to the Department of Health and Social Care's Manx Pay Terms and Conditions pay scales for Band 2 as part of the 2018-19 pay settlement through the removal of the bottom point of the scale. In addition, the Department for Education, Sport and Culture has adjusted the base pay for casual staff at the Villity Gaiety Complex in order to lift the hourly rate above the living wage from 1st of April 2018. The remaining groups under review are posts such as relief youth workers, therapeutic workers and apprentices. In most of these cases, the pay levels reflect that the posts are in training or occupied by younger people, where historically separate and lower minimum wage levels have applied.
Supplementary, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I note the Minister there didn't give a date for all those separate posts that are historically occupied by younger people or people in training. Can he please give a date by when those posts will also be paid a living wage? He also made no mention of contractors or agency staff. Can he please give us a date by which all those individuals will be paid at least a living wage? And he made no reference to services that are procured, so companies that provide government services and those staff not being employed directly by government. Is there any work being done to ensure that any procured services are also employing people on a living wage?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the first question is, I can't yet give a date for the remaining groups of posts which are still under review, and the Honourable Member from the Department for Enterprise will probably be aware that this all wraps up with minimum wage policies, which are historic in the Isle of Man, which are also currently under review as per the timetable set out in statute. So I would very much hope that the Treasury, the Department for Enterprise, Council of Ministers and then this Honourable Court will be thinking through the whole aspect of apprenticeships. Therapeutic work is to do with some important initiatives that Treasury have taken recently. It's to do with the fact that work is good for everybody, and there are some people who actually need work as part of therapy. They get something from it, and they can't always be committed to it, but that's a very valuable part, and I know that Treasury and Health and Social Care and Occupational Health particularly have worked very hard to make some exciting initiatives in this area, and that's currently under review. The final point is about the contractors, the agencies, procurement, and that's all part of social value procurement. We have a very important initiative a year or so ago in terms of new Treasury guidelines and principles for social value procurement. Procurement obviously is determined inside the departments procuring the service as well as in line with the guidance. And as the Honourable Questioner knows, he has supported me with trying to take forward the Living Wage Foundation initiative. And all this is connected. So to answer the question very simply, Treasury has responsibility for procurement policy. Social value procurement is an important aspect of it. The timescale for that is not yet fixed. Even decisions in respect of moving forward have not yet been made. But the Programme for Government does state an aspiration that the living wage, once it's published, having been calculated, does automatically impact on people who currently earn lower than the living wage, given the nature and definition of the living wage.
Supplementary, Ms. Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Minister stated a number of areas there, and that they're going to drop a couple of grades off the bottom of the scales. I've seen this so many times in my life within the public service that we continually do that when there becomes an issue. But what we don't do is look at the erosion within the pay grades. And I believe that I would like the Minister to confirm whether he is looking at that when he is saying with regards to the negotiations to ensure that there's no further erosion at the lower end, and the upper end, when they receive percentage increases, are going to be even higher. So we'll be back here in this court in a number of years' time saying, oh, we need to get rid of a couple of bottom grades. We need to fix the problem at the outset.
Reply, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't believe the honourable questioner was suggesting that the government in established posts should employ people at lower than £8.61 an hour. Having said that, the honourable questioner makes a good point that at any level of the pay scale there are issues about differentials, and that's exactly why this is, these changes have been negotiated with representatives of the employed people, and that will be exactly the sort of issue that Public Service Commission and the unions involved have been concerned about for all the months that we've been negotiating this. I can report, as far as I'm aware, there are absolutely no issues with the elimination of those on the pay scale in terms of the erosion of differentials that are currently concerns for the unions involved.
Sage.
Thank you, Mr. President. With regards to the actual cost for this, does the Minister know what the cost is? I'm totally in agreement with making sure people receive a living wage, and obviously he won't be aware because it's not his policy, but if the procurement policy is to change, we do need to be giving the small to medium businesses plenty of notice if they are going to have to pay the living wage to a number of the people. A lot of our businesses that are doing contract work through procurement with our government are small businesses, and you need to acknowledge the impact that this may have on them.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's a very helpful question. The cost is £16,394. When it includes bank and casual staff, it'll rise to approximately £94,500. The point made about giving notice to around procurement is exactly the right point. So that's why it would be absolutely wrong for me to lay down any time scale at this stage, because the lesson we've learned from the substantial minimum wage increases in certain sectors over the past 4 or 5 years since I've been in this honourable court is that what the smaller employers and working particularly in sectors which haven't been able to afford historically to pay that much, catering, retailing, care, they need time, they need it at the right time of year, and they need notice. So we do need to have a government policy and a Tynwald Court policy on exactly these sorts of issues. So it would be wrong, absolutely wrong, for me to announce any sort of timescale today beyond stating that I'm sure we can all concur that the right aspiration is to pay people a living wage, everybody a living wage.
Final supplementary, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now the Minister has acknowledged that we need a government policy and a Tynwald policy. When will he be bringing this forward? I'd like a date, please, by when we're going to be seeing government bring forward a policy to confirm that a living wage will be paid to every single one of its employees.
Mr. Thomas.
The Treasury Minister and myself, Minister for Enterprise, Chief Minister, Council Minister, are absolutely of the view that we need careful consideration of this timescale. It relates very much to statements that will be forthcoming in the autumn, I believe, if not earlier, in respect of minimum wage type policy. The Honourable Questioner's Department is very much involved in that. Read the statute. Enterprise, this is policy for Enterprise and Treasury primarily. This Minister for Policy and Reform has heard that this court has the aspiration that everybody in the Isle of Man is paid a living wage. It needs careful consideration, particularly in the sectors of retailing, hospitality, care and a few other sectors. Department for Enterprise is currently working on an impact assessment of what the impact of the minimum wage increases has been in those sectors, and I would very much hope that that work will be completed as soon as possible with the agreement of inside those sectors, so that we can have an evidence-based approach to laying out the timetable, which I hope we would all want to be as short as possible in terms of transition, but sufficiently long to give notice and to be realistic in those crucial sectors. The Isle of Man is nothing if we don't have a flourishing, healthy care sector, a flourishing, healthy retailing sector, a flourishing, healthy hospitality sector, and we need to take care to make sure we don't damage things by trying to make things better.